Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
The Phillies core is getting older, and that's just reality. When you look at the roster construction, you've got a window that's starting to close, and the only way to extend that window is by injecting young talent into the mix. Justin Crawford appears to have a clear path to being an everyday starting outfielder, and there's been some really interesting commentary from Dave Dombrowski about the pathway for several other top prospects as well. MLB.com just put out an article highlighting each team's top prospect to watch for 2026. And for the Phillies, it's Justin Crawford. He's the number 3 prospect in the organization, number 54 overall. Now, Andrew Painter could have been the choice here since he's the number 1 prospect and 16th overall, but Crawford is practically a lock to make the opening day roster. With Nick Castellanos and Kyle Schwarber not expected to return in 2026, okay, that's probably not accurate, but the outfield configuration is definitely changing. Crawford could be the everyday left fielder if Harrison Bader re-signs, or the everyday center fielder if Bader signs elsewhere. Either way, Crawford has nothing left to prove in AAA. It's time to see what he can do at the major league level. And I completely agree with that assessment. All last season, we were flirting with the idea of calling this guy up. Does he get a shot? Is he ready? And the answer kept being not yet, but the skills are real. Crawford brings something to the Phillies lineup that they haven't had in a while, legitimate speed and athleticism at the top of the order. Look at his numbers from last year. 46 stolen bases, 147 hits, a 45% hard hit rate, a 411 on-base percentage, and an 800 OPS. He's maintained a 300 batting average or higher since AA. Those are legit numbers that translate to productive major league performance if he can make the adjustments. Now, obviously, there's a difference between minor league pitching and facing the best arms in baseball every night. We need to see if Crawford can stand up to that level of competition. But it's time to find out. The quote from Dave Dombrowski that I found most reassuring was when he said they're going to give Crawford an opportunity to play through his mistakes. That's huge. Young players need runway to develop, and hearing the front office commit to that approach tells me they're serious about making this work. Dombrowski said something interesting during the trade deadline last year. When people asked about bringing Crawford up, his pushback was that they needed to have a concrete role for him. They weren't going to call him up just to have him sit on the bench or play sporadically. They wanted a clear game plan where he'd be heavily involved. That's the blueprint for this year, and my expectation is we're going to see 100-plus games from Justin Crawford. The outfield situation is still fluid. They need to figure out what's happening with Castellanos. I'm not comfortable with the entire outfield being just Dallas Garcia, Justin Crawford, and Brandon Marsh as the only options. There needs to be another proven piece added to that mix, which will obviously shift the playing time calculus. But Crawford is clearly being viewed as a priority piece of this puzzle. For the Phillies as a whole, it's time to start developing from within. Look, Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, Zach Wheeler, Trea Turner, these guys are still the foundation. They're the high-dollar players who dictate what this team's ceiling looks like. But the only way this team actually improves outside of making big trades or signing expensive free agents is by developing young talent. You have to hit on your prospects. And here's something Dave Dombrowski doesn't get enough credit for. He's absolutely stockpiled this farm system. When you look at the Phillies' best tools across the organization, it's impressive. Best hitter, Justin Crawford. Though keep in mind he's more of a contact guy than a power hitter. Set your expectations accordingly. Best power hitter, Gabriel Rincones, who's still relatively young and unproven, but that dude can absolutely mash baseballs. He's a big-bodied outfielder who I'd like to see get a dark horse look this year. Best strike zone discipline goes to Aiden Miller, who I want to circle back to because he's a fascinating case. Fastest base runner, Justin Crawford again. Best athlete, Matthew Fisher. Best fastball, Andrew Painter. Good to see him on this list. And best curveball goes to Gage Wood, which I love because Wood is such an interesting prospect. Wood was the first-round pick this past draft. He threw a no-hitter in the College World Series and is an absolute competitor. He loves letting opponents know about it when he strikes them out. He's on the older side for a prospect, which typically isn't the Phillies' drafting philosophy. They usually go for young high school kids like Andrew Painter and develop them on their own timeline. But Wood is as polished as you're going to find from a pitching prospect. I wouldn't mind seeing him get an opportunity if he earns it in the minors. Now let's talk about Aiden Miller, because I'd like to see the organization make a decision about where he fits. Trey Turner is locked in at shortstop for what feels like forever. I know he had his best season last year, and I'll admit he won me back over to some extent, but he's not a guy who fires me up the way Harper or Schwarber does. Still, Turner seems intent on staying at shortstop, and to his credit, he produced his best defensive season there last year. But that's Aiden Miller's natural position. So where does Miller fit? Is there a world where you try him at second base? Could he platoon with Bryson Stott? Is Alec Boehm back in the trade conversation, opening up third base? I'd like to hear the thought process behind the scenes about Miller's timeline. I don't think we see him this season, but I want him on a trajectory similar to Crawford, where he flirts with a call-up, and then next year there's a concrete plan to get him involved. Then there's Andrew Painter, which is the most complicated situation of all. Dombrowski said back in August that he thinks Painter is a premier starting pitcher, but he's coming off basically missing 2 years after Tommy John surgery. It often takes another year after you start throwing again to get back to where you were before the injury. Last year, Dombrowski made the mistake of putting a timeline on Painter's return, saying July-ish for a potential call-up. He just wasn't ready. He didn't look ready at any point. This is a huge year for Painter. I can't imagine they start him in the regular rotation right away, but who knows? There's still a lot of roster construction to be completed. What's Zach Wheeler's injury timeline? Do they give Taijuan Walker another shot in the rotation? Is Ranger Suarez coming back? At some point, they have to figure out what Painter is going to be. I pushed the concept last year of why not give him some bullpen work at the major league level. I get not wanting to interrupt his routine, but introducing him in short doses seems like the best way to acclimate him to the big leagues. It's far more common now to bring a guy up for an inning here and there than stretch him out over time. I'd love for Andrew Painter to be the front-end starter everyone expects him to be, but I need to see it on the field first. I'm not approaching this season assuming he'll be an impact player. I'll welcome it as a pleasant surprise if he finds his form after essentially learning to pitch with a new arm, but there's a lot of work to be done. The bottom line is this Phillies team has a stronger farm system than I can remember in decades. Even during their rebuilding years, they didn't have blue-chip prospects like this. Dombrowski has made it a priority not just to acquire prospects, but to retain them. These aren't just trade chips to go all in on a World Series run. Now we have to find out if these prospects can turn into productive major league players at the rate they're projected to. This year is a huge step toward answering that question. Justin Crawford is the guy carrying the most pressure, the one who will headline the output for this collective group of young players. We'll see if he's ready to make an impact on the big league roster and whether the Phillies development system can turn potential into production when it actually matters.